Go ahead and go into your working folder and reopen the one we used in the previous lesson called lineart.ai. Let's start with this one again and start from scratch. Let's begin by basically selecting it and live tracing it up here, or image trace. It used to be called live trace. Okay, so there we are. We are now in the middle, kind of like in this netherland between original raster and vector. But it's not exactly what I want, and none of the defaults are really giving me what I want. So we go to this button right here. That button gives me image trace options. Now the options up here, these are default just like right in here. You had like outline, black and white. You could try those, but you could also do them right here. If we wind up making something, let me select that again. If we wind up making something that basically is something we like, based on our style of drawing, the thickness of the lines we produce when we're working with pencil or whatever, we come up with a really cool way to work. We can always click this button right here and save it as a preset and come back to it. That's kind of nice. Down here you have your tracing result as in view, and that's the same as right up here. So you've got all the different options to view it. But if you click this eyeball right here, you see the before and the after. And I'm clicking and holding. Before, after. Down here, your mode, black and white, because we're working with a sketch. If we had color or grayscale, we could use those too. We'll leave that at black and white. Down here, you have a threshold. Now, what is that? When I sketch, I'm not a robot. My lines get thinner and thicker. They get lighter and sometimes darker based on my pressure of the pencil against the paper. What threshold will define is how dark it has to be defined as a line. So if I come in here and go ahead and grab and pull this way, watch what happens. I'm saying less. Okay, if I go this way, I'm saying more. If I go all the way, watch what happens. Everything's fair game, and we don't want that. Let me bring that down to about there or so and let go, and I like that. I'm happy with that threshold. We have 68 paths, 2 colors, black and white, and 1,518 anchor points. That's a lot of anchor points when you think about it, but I have seen that number on photographs over 100,000. Now, what does that mean? That makes it extremely difficult to be printed, because remember what happens. Illustrator sends the math to the print or output device. The output device then converts the math into the image. If you've got hundreds of thousands of points, that's hundreds of thousands of mathematical expressions. 2 things might happen. Number 1, it may lock up your system and you're going to have to start all over again on the print part. Number 2, it might take 3.5 days to do. Now we'll talk about simplifying a little bit later in this lesson. But let me do this. Let me open up Advanced. Now in Advanced, number 1, you have paths. Now paths in terms of simplification of the paths. Our paths are pretty accurate right now. If I go all the way to the right, we probably won't see much of anything actually happening, and we really don't. But watch what happens when I go the other way, and it simplifies the paths. Actually, you know, that's kind of neat. Let's take that back somewhere around here. Now, in corners, basically we're talking about simplicity of the corners. And we can go this way, which doesn't really do a whole lot. Or we can go this way to low, and in this case it hardly does anything at all. The corners are pretty much well defined. So let's go ahead and take that about back to the middle. Now noise, well, you can add some noise to the image. And let me go ahead and take this all the way up this way. Let me show you this. Now, if you saw that, one area right here went black. Now, that's an area I probably didn't clean up as well in Photoshop, and it had some shades of gray in it. Take it down to here. Now, watch that area. See, it cleared up that area. That's what noise does. Now, the next 2 down are methods. Now, the methods are either abutting or overlapping. Now, what abutting does is it creates paths in cutout form, and overlapping stacks the paths. You really won't see much now if you change those, but it does influence how you work with the image after you've converted it. And I would suggest abutting is probably the best one to use here. Next one down is, do you want to create fills and or strokes? Some of these lines may not actually be strokes. They're thick enough, the computer says they must be a fill. I'm going to fill them with black. So let me turn on strokes, and then come over here and turn off fills as soon as it gets done. See those areas that went away? Let me turn them back on and off again. And then turn it off. Those were areas that it defined as a fill. Now all we have is strokes. Usually when I'm working on an image for trace to outline, that's the way I want it. I don't want fills, I just want strokes. Now the strokes here are defined by thickness. If I move this item down, say to, well, lower number, watch what happens to our image. It begins getting less because I'm saying strokes have to be 6. Now if I take that back up to, say, 10, we should get more stuff. Now do you want to snap your curves to the lines, and you want to ignore white? Now remember in our first lesson, basically what we had we had that area of white around the photograph that we removed. If you turn on ignore white, it will do it for you automatically. Now what we have done has reduced our anchors to 502. 502 with only one color now because we turned off fills. So I like what I have. I feel it's a good mix for what I do as a designer. And I come up here and I say, well, save it as a new preset. Next time you need it, it will be in that list. Let's say we like this. Let's go ahead and get out of here. Let's go ahead and expand it, meaning we're ready to go. And there it is. Now you say, well, it's still got 500 anchor points in it. That's kind of a lot. If I had done this with a pen tool, I bet I could have done it with a lot less. And I agree, you probably could. How do we simplify something like this if we feel it's necessary? Well, select it after you've expanded it. Go up to the word object on the pull-down menu, go to Path, and select Simplify. Now in Simplify, let's turn on the preview. This one now only has 171, but you can see the difference. It really did influence the shape itself. So I can't go down that far with this option. So I'm going to turn preview on so we can see it. Let's go in and change our precision on our curves. Let's raise that up. And a little bit more on angle threshold. Again, if we turn that on or off, that looks pretty accurate. But we have successfully reduced the number of anchor points almost by 50%. Click OK. Well, there you go. It started out as a sketch simply on paper. After a scan, a little time playing around with it in Photoshop, bringing it into Illustrator, it is now a resolution-independent vector graphic as if I had designed it directly inside of Illustrator. That's the primary purpose of using trace, in my opinion.